like big boys.
Can I still do that? I wrote this before Lizzo got canceled. Whatever, I'm keeping it. I'm a fan of the big dudes in video games. We got Astaroth, we got Nautilus, we got Cold Lightan. Holy shit, look at this guy. Oh my god. Beautiful Joe is also in this game. Look at the size difference. I gotta do a video on Tatsunoko vs Capcom. This shit is too funny. I like doing big damage, and I think nuance and strategy are for cowards. But I also like not exploding in a single hit. Give me just enough life to face roll my way through a problem. I played rugby in high school as scrum half. If you don't know anything about rugby, scrum half is like a football halfback and a quarterback rolled into one. If you also don't know anything about football, which is sort of understandable given the fact you're watching a Monster Rancher video in 2023, it means I was the playmaker, but not the guy taking hits. You're important and you get a lot of credit, but like, you're this guy. You're not the guy. This guy is the coolest guy. The dump truck with arms. Or this guy. Why is he so big? What the hell? Here's what I would look like if I stood beside this guy. The big dudes had your back, and it's really, really hard not to appreciate that. And today's monster is a big dude who will always have your back, as long as you teach him one specific technique.
Mighty machines, big and mighty machines, working for you, doing mighty things there. Mighty machines.
Golem is the tank in Monster Rancher. He's the anti-pixie. Huge power and defensive stats give him the ability to just slug it out until he lands a single attack, and then it's all over. Don't say it won't happen. You've played Monster Rancher. You've had this happen to you. Golem's good nature and above average lifespan make him a very easy to play casual monster. Early game, all you need to do is hit hard and not die instantly, and both of those are what he's best at. Later on, things might get more difficult if you raise his stats the way they're intended, as low skill and speed is a death sentence for a monster with a guts rate as slow as his is. He may only need to land one hit, but unfortunately if he's getting withered, he might only get to swing one hit in the first place. Because his resource generation is the second worst in the game, he has to run speed in all but a few formats. It is possible to make a tank golem work, but the chances to build one are few and far between. The really bad speed gains tacked onto golem mean that it may be hard to max out his speed if you pick a subtype with a shorter lifespan. Using ghost chips as a secret seasoning during combo can really help make the difference, but the general rules stay the same. Raise the monster's worst stats during prime, and its best stats before and after. Golem is historically probably the strongest monster in the franchise on average across all games. The only game he's really bad in is Line Monster Farm, and are we really going to count that? I'm not. In Monster Rancher 2, he's one of the absolute strongest monsters in the entire game, and the single best anti-tank. Withering down a slow tank is fine, but beating their ass with no regard to how tough they think they are will always be way more efficient. But this ass-beating potential comes with a cost, and that cost is the worst hit percents on any monster in the game. Now this doesn't really matter when you're fighting tanks, so it really does help out the anti-tank title, but there's no monster in the game that sees -7 to hit as pretty good. But Golem takes what he can get in this regard. We've seen how rough extremely high hit percent and low damage is as a gimmick on monsters like Hopper, so how good is the opposite? Well, if you've been paying attention, I've spoiled it already, so surprise. So here's the thing. While lots of slow guts rate monsters have really good basic tags, Golem is not one of them. He's got long animation times on everything and has a hell of a time building guts, so Punch's 19 force for 10 guts is a lot weaker than its nearly 2-to-1 force to guts ratio would indicate. We're going to be talking a lot about force to guts ratio with Golem. As we'll see later, if you're able to double the force and cost, the tech becomes very good, but multiple small jabs is not really where Golem sees success, even if that small jab is like almost C-rank force. Kick actually does hit the coveted 2-to-1 force to guts ratio, but it's more of the same. With a big guts lead, swinging a bunch of kicks isn't terrible, but the hit percent hampers its usefulness something major. These are far, far away from the depths of basic tech hell, but Golem doesn't really want to use them. Heavy punch is a bit better on the animation length, but it falls into a lot of the same traps. 28 force on a slow guts rate monster ends up being heavily inflated versus most of the cast, so this will often do a bit more damage than you'd expect, but it's still avoided on most builds. -15 hit is not something anyone wants to have to build around, and heavy kick is often forgotten because of this. Is what I would say if it wasn't for New Bottle. It's called Dream Golem in the English version, but New Bottle is a better name. Anyway, look at this shit. This is the reason to get heavy kick. It's funny. What's going on here? Slap is Golem's third most accurate attack, and it has 0 hit. That's actually wild. What's more wild is despite that, this shit hits like every time anyway because Golem's amazing guts correction pulls up that accuracy. Slap ends up being severely above curve for a hit tech. Way more accurate than you'd expect it to be and just incredible numbers elsewhere. All on a tech that is the definition of middling when it comes to its actual hit percent. And as we're about to see, all of Golem's hit techs are great. Giant Slap is a great way to make sure speed monsters know their place. A little more Withering to make up for the animation time means this ends up being a terrifying option for Golem on a much lower risk profile than he's used to elsewhere in his kit. Charge is very similar to Giant Slap, more expensive for more damage and Withering. Though to be honest, there's not actually a whole lot that differentiates them. Get them both. Why not? You can have both as a treat. No one's stopping you. Clap Attack does the classic Sharp Tech thing of doing everything but nothing well. Tail is old as time. The low hit percent really hampers how much damage it does on average, as you're going to have a hell of a time actually hitting. There's a lot to cheer about if you land a crit, but Golem's got better options. Giant Clap is a huge round opener, but bizarrely he has pretty low crit chance all things considered. Sort of like a mini special tech with big damage and Withering, but then again, the minus hit percent ruins the party. If you're gonna high roll, you might as well use Brow Smash instead. It's cheaper than Giant Clap for significantly more damage and an insane 50-50 shot to crit on a mon with the Bad Natured Stress bonus. I'm not gonna lie, minus 16 hit is really rough. A crit Brow Smash is a game opener and ender all rolled into one, and the frame 1 gamble is usually worth it. Thwack is underwhelming. Just like Slap is a hit tech with 0 hit, Thwack is a Withering tech with higher damage than Withering. Golem's a bit typecast. It's super cheap, but you could also just use Slap, which has higher damage and an uber significant additional 12% hit. Thwack's Withering is completely lost on a move with a 6-second animation time and a monster with Golem's Guts rate. The fastest monsters in the game can absorb a Thwack and have more guts than they started with by the time the move finishes animating. Smash Thwack is very funny because it does almost no additional damage over Thwack and instead actually decides to focus on Withering this time. It's not what Golem normally wants to be focusing on, but it's at least much better at Withering than its predecessor is. Withering as a concept attempts to be an approximation of demoralizing an opponent and sapping their will to fight. And I think smooshing someone into a pancake would do that, so, at least it's great thematically. Now, normally I do a full section on intelligence attacks, but no monster has fewer intelligence attacks than Golem. So I'm just going to insert the one he's got here. Earthquake is far and away Golem's best Withering tech, and far and away its best intelligence tech. Intelligence Golem is functionally unusable in competitive play, but Earthquake sometimes sees use in mixed attacker formats. It's still really not something he often wants to open a game with, but often mixed attacker formats tend to favor tanks, so that meta allows the minus 11 hit to be a non-issue, and maybe gives Golem a guts lead to start off the game. It's one of the best examples in the game of a competitive rule set single-handedly changing a tech's viability, but as we'll see later, a guts lead in this situation is a lot less valuable than scoring a KO. Palm Strike is an anomaly. It's a heavy tech, and it's also Golem's most accurate option outside of his hit techs, and that's with minus 5 hit. 24 guts is a lot on a Golem, but Palm Strike is worth every point and then some. And 1 palm is very good, but sometimes 2 palms aren't actually better than 1. And double palms ends up being a bit too expensive to justify the risk. Golem doesn't want to be spending over 30 guts unless it's game ending, and while that's usually the case here, it can often feel like it's just too much investment for a KO, and the same thing can be accomplished swinging cheaper attacks with higher frequency. Now, I'm not saying this like the tech is bad, it's fine, it's okay, the numbers aren't bad at all. It's just not overtuned on a monster that has a pile of incredible options to spend its precious guts on instead. If you like double palms but want to spend less, well, Uppercut. Uppercut says fuck it, I'm just gonna do the same damage for 21 guts. What do you mean minus 18 hit? I don't know what that means, I can't do math. I don't need to know how to count if my opponent's dead. Diving Press is a huge nuke used mostly as an anti-tank option. Minus 20 hit is just brutally awful, and he takes a ton of recoil on a miss, but if it hits, he's guaranteed to win. This makes it an incredible desperation option that can be fired off to steal games late, and God help any opponent running a defensive build that's big enough to force the match to start in the 3rd slot. Fish Shot is a move with great values hindered severely by being attached to a slow guts rate behemoth like Golem. This isn't actually a Goey crossover tech like a lot of people think at first. Every Golem can get this, but no Golem does. Unfortunately, 50 guts for a potential round opener like this does a lot to get Golem's opponent back into the game. This tech fills the exact same role as something like Dragon Slamming Down, but Slam is more accurate and costs way less. If Fish Shot also cost 40, it would probably see a lot more use, but it doesn't. So it doesn't. This missile ends up being a better option not despite the fact it costs more, but actually because of this. This is not a great round opener, but if you've landed a slap or two, all of a sudden it becomes an intensely scary closer. 55 guts facilitates Golem walking forward towards his cheaper options at round start, since he can't actually use this until a bit of time has passed. Are the chances of Golem actually being in slot 4 with 55 guts at any point in the game after the first 10 seconds good? No, not really, but 45 Force and Withering is definitely worth experimenting with in your builds. Now we get to talk about the spinny moves. One spins vertically and one spins horizontally, but they're more or less the same move. They both cost 50, they both have minus 16 hit, and if you hit either of them, you're probably going to win. But one is better than the other. How is that possible? Well, one has a huge 64 force and does a massive 38 withering, but the other has 78. Holy shit. I wrote the script a while ago and completely forgot it was that high. It's a lot of damage. Both of these techs have the goal of wiping your opponent's entire bloodline off the map, but if that's the goal, why not use one that wipes harder? 38 withering on Roll Assault feels like you're setting up for a follow-up play, but like, why bother? Just hit Cyclone instead. Now, Roll Assault's huge withering does actually have some niche use in it being marginally better at stopping grit from proccing, since the amount of stockpiled guts at KO plays a huge part in whether or not a monster will pop its grit, but like, it's a marginal contingency plan at best. Roll Assault shares a slot with Diving Press and they do the same thing and are both stupid and accurate. Golem would probably prefer to do damage rather than spending another 20 guts to do some withering, so it ends up being a little bit outclassed by Diving Press. But Cyclone? That's the strongest tech in the game, baby. There's only 2 techs in the game at 70 or more, with the other being Racky's Explosion. Explosion does a literal, measurable fuck-ton of recoil, and that's how a 9 guts rate monster justifies having a nuke of that caliber. But like, that means it's still an additional 11.5% jump to Cyclone. This is astronomical. Here, I've plotted out the force of every tech in the game. You can tell I've been watching John Boy's videos, right? They're pretty good. Now at the very bottom we've got Pixie's Kiss and Foul Gas, which do no damage. Almost everything in E is a basic tech or a withering tech of some kind. Nighton Ink, Meow, and a bunch of the other techs here are meant to wither and not do damage. In the middle of the pack, we've got your mainstays like Naga's Turn Assault. This shit is great. This section here is all the fucked up stuff where the gamblers live. Techs in this area can't ever really be truly bad because if you miss, and you're going to with these techs, you can just try again. Here's Golem's techs. Golem's techs occupy a lot of this space and they're part of the reason he's so good. What's this one? Well, that's a story for another time. But up here we see the beginning of S-Force, the highest category of force the game measures, which as a kid made a lot of these techs difficult to differentiate because each letter grade occupies 10 values, but S is just the super heavyweight division. You got 50 or above, you're S rank. Here's Death Final. Here's Diving Press and Roll Assault. But where's Cyclone? Something I think is pretty funny is that Roll Assault and Cyclone in Monster Rancher 1 were somehow more exactly the same than they are in Monster Rancher 2. Now, Monster Rancher 1 has a much higher power level than 2, so it's not fair to plot them against Monster Rancher 2 techs, but I'm gonna do it anyway. Also, just for good measure, here's Golem's Chop from Monster Rancher 1. This is insane. Golem's always been good, but goddamn, Monster Rancher 1 is a squirrely game. Astro is the strongest Golem in the game, unsurprisingly, as a Metal Nurse subbreed. Astro is often considered one of the absolute strongest monsters in the entire game when all subbreeds are considered individually. The removal of the 45 guts limit in DX didn't help Golem as much as it did Dragon and Arrowhead, but good god, he did not need the help. Stop feeding that boy, he's too big already. There's certainly an argument to be made that Golem is still better than both. Looking back on what we've talked about, he may be lacking something as truly fucked up as Arrowhead's Sacred Combo or Dragon's Trample, but he's got a ton of efficiency and B-Force techs for cheap to take out the competition. He's a mix and match monstrosity. What hit tech do you want? They're all good. Heavy techs? Bomb Strike is almost a hit tech, Uppercut wins the game, and Diving Press wins the game with extreme prejudice. Cyclone lets you delete opponents on frame 1 as long as it hits, which given how popular tanks are in low stat cap metas, is very often. And Sharp techs? Well, his Sharp techs fall into a lot of the classic pitfalls. You can't win them all, I suppose. It is now officially another time, so let's talk about this dot up here. What is this? Surely it's incredibly inaccurate. Only -7? Well, that's not too bad. That's actually really good considering, the force and cost. Okay, so Uncle Moose pulled a fast one on you. This tech does not actually exist. This is Golem's Brow Hit with the critical hit proc. I know, that's not fair, but hey, neither is Brow Hit. It's hard to put in words just how heinous this tech is, but it's kind of like this. Here are some of the most messed up things about Brow Hit. It only costs 18 guts for almost 30 force. Almost 50-50 shot to crit with the bad natured stress bonus, and it withers for a really decent amount when it absolutely does not need to. That was me just listing the tech parameters. But what about this? Most attacks have different animation lengths depending on if they deal a lot of damage or not. There are 3 animation types. One is a glancing blow, which leaves the opponent standing. One is a knockdown, and the other is a knockdown that causes a stagger when they get back up. The third one happens with certain techs when the opponent suffers an insane amount of damage in a single hit. And the first one is always the most beneficial unless you're trying to run out the clock. It has a shorter animation time and lets you attack again quicker. Brow Hit has a weird distinction in that it only ever does the first animation. Golem never has to worry about Brow Hit slowing down his ability to get back into the game, or give his opponent more guts than necessary while they recover. Brow Hit is the monkey paw Golem wished for to be top tier, but he was also smart enough to wish for no downsides on Brow Hit. We didn't really mention it, but Golem's intelligence gain is actually pretty good considering how useless it is. He's a smart cookie. The rest of his stuff helps round out Brow Hit, but this is the star player. This is the scrum half, and God knows if I was as good at winning games as Brow Hit is, I'd probably still be narrating this video right now and nothing in my life would be tangibly different because there's no real path to make money in rugby in Canada. Oh well. So with the addition of Brow Hit, how do his builds play? Well, kind of just glue Brow Hit into whatever you're doing and bingo bango, you got a potential tournament winner. I'm not kidding, it's that easy. It's easily the best tech in the game not owned by Metal Nerd. No exaggeration. Another thing that's really crazy is just how good Rockgeiger's set is. I know this skill is very easy to deal with by just building a monster with a lot of speed, but he's a rank C monster and he's got options for everything. If you were to scale up his stats 1-to-1 to fight in rank S without changing his kit, he's probably still one of the best monsters in the rank. Slap's cool, Charge is cool, Brow Smash is cool, Uppercut is cool, Cyclone is cool within reason, but Brow Hit is ice cold. Golem is a menace, and it's genuinely so exciting to me that even after all these years, a monster like him is as good as he is. I love the big boys, and Golem is the biggest and the boyest. In the show, he's a gentle giant. In the game, he's definitely gonna flick your head off your fucking shoulders. What are you gonna do to stop it? Wait, no, not that. Don't do that. Don't do that, man. Come on, man, be cool. And if you want to be cool too, you could watch the credits. So many awesome people help support this channel, and I think it's only fair you watch and memorize their names, otherwise it's kind of like you're stealing from them, and that's not cool. Thanks for watching. If you want to be like one of these beauties, consider joining the Patreon, or even just popping into a stream or the Discord. I love you either way. I'm in my gentle giant phase after this video. See you next time.